Good morning. My name's Chris Ray. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer, Clerk Treasurer for the Municipality of Wawa and also a ROMA board member. You will all recognize our next guest as the Michael J. Smither Question Box moderator for many years, Mr. Fred Dean. Fred knows all things municipal government. For years, he has worked with elected officials and municipal staff, giving them the tools to make effective decisions on behalf of their communities and giving advice on governance, conflict of interest, codes of conduct, and municipal powers. Fred is also a lawyer who acts exclusively for municipalities and municipal associations in Ontario. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Fred Dean and his group of experts.
Well, good morning and welcome. This has been one of the longest standing tradition of the ROMA conference. Goes back at least 70 years, I think probably closer to 80 or 85 years. It's pretty significant, and I'm really pleased and proud to be here and be part of this. Thanks, Chris, for the comments and the opening comments. As always, this panel, the purpose that we perceive is to get some practical advice to you, listen to your questions and see what issues you want to discuss. And I've been fortunate to be able to put together a group of people who, frankly, we met yesterday, and the expertise around the room was amazing to listen to them speak. So I'm looking forward to this morning. I'm going to start. Where am I going to start? Let's start at the very far. Your far left, and that's Lynn Balfour. Lynn is a building official. She's been a chief building official. She has been on this panel now for 13 years, and she is now the Director of Education for the OBOA, the Ontario Building Officials Association. She's responsible for all continuing education and professional development for building officials. She's 30 years experience in the field of building officials. She is the past president of the Ontario Building Association. Really pleased that she's back with us. I made a mistake. When the program was printed, I did not properly update the ROMA people about Rob Walton. Rob's been on the panel for 18 years now, considerable experience. He is currently, despite what the program says, the Director of Infrastructure Services for Brant County. Hey. There you go. And he's the owner of RW Squared Engineering. He's a professional engineer, 33 years experience, 14 as consultant and 19 years in municipal government, both in southern and northern Ontario. Responsible for infrastructure projects and municipal public works, and there are always lots of issues around that. He was a member of the Ontario Drinking Water Advisory Council from 2004 to 2016. If you've been with us for years, you will know that the panel has changed this year. We have a new member, and that is because Scott Tusaw, who was on the panel for over 20 years, was last year appointed to the Ontario Municipal Board. So we had to find a planner, and I'm really fortunate to introduce Sandra Weber to you. She's the Director of Planning and Development at Huron County. She has degrees in urban and regional planning and development from Waterloo and rural planning and development from the University of Guelph. She's the chair of the Ontario Professional Planners Institute, the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Working Group. In her part-time, she runs a beef calf operation with her husband and 3 teenage sons. Sandra, welcome to the panel. We're pleased you're here. Thank you. I always debate whether to introduce Sid Vanderbeen or not. He's probably the best known person in the room. He has been on this panel since 1992. He brings 27 years on this panel. He's a civil engineer. He is the drainage coordinator for the Ministry of Agriculture and Food and the Ministry of Rural Affairs. Anything about drainage, Sid is the expert, and we're really pleased. He is a mainstay of this group. Finally, immediately to my right is Jody Johnson. I was astounded. It's the 5th year that you've been on the panel. It's really amazing. Jody's a lawyer. She is partner with the law firm of Aird Burles, and she and I go back to Sudbury, my Sudbury days when she was the clerk administrator in French River, and she was also with Municipal Affairs in the Sudbury office. I'm really pleased she's here. I'm really pleased she decided to go into law. She's proving to be an outstanding person in making a contribution. You may have noticed that this is a panel that is a tribute to Michael Smither. Some of you in this room will have known Michael over the years. I just want to say Michael was the publisher and editor of Municipal World for a long, long time, and he chaired this panel for over 35 years. He was the champion of local government. He was our voice, and he was also our conscience, which made it pretty important. And he was dedicated to the success of this panel. Pretty special guy, and it's a real tribute to have it named after him. So let's go over the rules quickly. They'll sound a lot like the rules that Nigel gave you yesterday for the ministers' session, the last one being the important one, the discretion resting with me. We're going to deal with written questions first, then we will take questions from the floor. And I really encourage you, we have a short time this morning. If you have questions, get to the microphone so that we can have it. We are not looking for speeches. We are looking for one question only with no subparts. And it shouldn't be a local matter. It should have some broad appeal to the province generally, or a part of the province. That's it. Let's get to the questions, and I think what we'll do, let's just go down the row. Lynn, maybe we can start with you and answer some of the questions that we've received.
With the written one?
Oh, we'll start with Rob. All right.
Okay. It's interesting, this year they've changed the questions, the little sheet of paper. We don't know who submitted the question, so we don't get to congratulate them for a person. So if the person that asked this question wants to stand up, I'll congratulate. It's a good question. I'm just like the people yesterday on the podium congratulating everyone for their questions. On asset management planning, there seems to be an emphasis on grants. Grants are welcome, but shouldn't the emphasis be on what needs to be spent? I agree. Asset management, even for small municipalities, when you do your plan, you're going to find out you have, lots of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of assets, and you've probably got yearly capital budgets of in the tens of millions of dollars. So the thought of getting a grant for several $100,000 or $1 million really is a small part of what your piece of business is, and your business needs to be about planning for your infrastructure when it needs to be replaced and the like. So yes, grants are welcome. They should be a small part of what you're looking for, not the big picture, for sure.
Right. Sandra.
Thank you. One of the questions that I have is on the issue of crown patents and the municipality's authority to regulate the use of land through official plans and zoning bylaws. And this is being raised by property owners. So the question is, how are municipalities dealing with this issue? So a good question. I mean, we are dealing with this in our county. We have received comments through our natural heritage planning process about crown patents superseding a municipality's authority to regulate the use of land through official plans. So we wanted to be clear in providing a response back to our property owners. So we did get a legal opinion from Peter Pickfield, a solicitor from Guelph. And so he based this on case law decision, but sort of the three comments that he made was that municipalities do have the authority to pass official plans and zoning bylaws, and this was given to municipalities by the province through the Constitution Act, and that crown patents do not actually supersede that right. And also the question expropriation came up when designating lands. And designating lands or de-designating lands through an official plan does not constitute expropriation unless there is, dedicating those lands for a public park or something to that effect. So that's how our council is proceeding, is based on that opinion from our solicitor.
Thank you. Sid?
Good morning. First of all, full disclosure, I didn't get a written question on drainage this year, so I had to make one up. And that only suggests to me that none of you have any issues on drainage. And first time, I think, we've never had any issues. So anyways, I made one up, and here's my made-up question. It is increasingly difficult to get approvals and permits for work under the Drainage Act. Why is this happening? What is being done to address this? In the past, drains were built with a single purpose, to move water. And that's no longer the case. It's still moving water, but it's more than that now. And I use, when I describe this, I use an old African proverb: when the music changes, so does the dance. And the music has changed. We have things that are, drainage channels are multi-purpose. They provide fish habitat, wildlife habitat, water quality, endangered species. And to ignore all those things, those aspects of drainage, is to ignore the music. You got to change the dance. Now, we are still working with some of these agencies to make sure that the permitting and approval processes work as good as possible, as seamlessly as possible, but that doesn't always happen, and it certainly doesn't happen overnight. So we're working on it, but it will be a part of drainage life for years to come.
Thank you. Jody?
I actually did get a question in the box. And my question was, so I am off to Mexico for a 2-week holiday. Council has decided to call a meeting where a very important issue is to be decided. Do I have a right of having the option to call into the meeting and participate and vote? My first response is, you're going on holidays to Mexico. Hopefully your family won't be really annoyed that you want to take a call to participate in a council meeting. But secondly, and importantly, the answer to that question is, I'm going to give you my lawyer answer. It depends, but it depends on what your procedural bylaw provides for. As of January 1st of this year, the Municipal Act has been amended in Section 238. There's 2 subsections, 3.1 and 3.2, that provide that your council can, through its procedural bylaw, permit and provide for electronic participation in council meetings, in open meetings of council only. It's specifically prohibited that your procedural bylaw can't apply to closed meetings, so you could participate electronically and participate in the debate and vote through participation if your procedural bylaw allows it. One important point, though you are participating in the meetings, and that will be reflected in the minutes, your attendance and participation is not counted towards quorum of the meeting. So that's the answer to that question.
I just want to add a couple of comments. I agree with Jody in terms of this electronic meeting. Some people are saying this is the best thing ever, and other people are saying run away, run away. 2 cautions from my point of view is, in your procedure bylaw, when you amend it, you have to set out a process in terms of how people get to be away and be able to participate in the meeting. So you're going to have written requests, and they are going to have to be time stamped, which probably means to me email. And let's take a council of 5 people. If 3 people decide they're not going to be there, you're only eligible to have 2 of them attend virtually. You need to determine a process to who's going to be doing that. It's something that I think you need to be cautious about. Keep in mind we live in an era of accountability and transparency. How are you going to be transparent as a council with this person from away? I think you probably have to have a system whereby not only members of council can see and hear if you're going to use a visual, but also the members of the audience, the public that is there. And I think probably the voting process you're going to have to use is a process of recorded votes. I don't think there's any other way you can get around the issue of having that person vote and having them see how the others are voting as well. So if you think it's a good idea, give some thought to the process, how you're going to be doing it, and what is fair for every member of your council. Do we have another question? Right.
So the question is, when will the government enforce the ban on spreading untreated raw septage? So this question should have been asked yesterday at the minister's panel, but and I don't have an answer for this question, obviously, but I will give some of the background to this and what has happened with it and the like. So if I go back in my long and storied career, there's one event that happened in the middle of my career, which was Walkerton. That happened in May of 2000. And I can't remember the exact piece of legislation because that's like, 16 years ago, 18 years ago almost, that happened. But the government did pass a piece of legislation shortly after Walkerton, which proposed a 5-year phase-in for the ban of untreated septage being spread on land. The regulations for that have never been brought into play, so that you still can get permits to spread untreated raw septage. One of the reasons that's never been brought into play is that there's many parts of the province where there's no capacity to treat this material. If you're adjacent to a municipality which has a sewage treatment plant of medium to large capacity, it's usually not a big problem. I was involved in a biosolids master plan a number of years ago where the municipality I worked in, where I think we figured it was 95+% of both hauled and raw septage was actually treated at the wastewater treatment plants already. So that was a good scenario. But when you get into more rural Ontario, there definitely is not capacity to do this, and it's a big problem. And I went online this morning to try and find out what was going on. I saw actually a couple of master plans where some places were looking at this, and it's a big process and it's big dollars. So that's the background to it. I don't have an answer.
Right. Encourage you now, if anyone has a question, to go to the microphone. I do have a question here that that came in. It's whose idea was it to start taxing hunt camps in Ontario, as they've been a mainstay for many years? I have no idea. We talked about it as the panel, and the best answer we can give you is MPAC would be responsible for indicating that it's taxable, and that's where the issue would come from. Let's go to the microphones, and we'll deal with other questions as they come. Microphone number 1.
My name's Mark Reeser, and I'm Vice President of the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, and I feel badly that Mr. Van der Veen did not get a question. He had to make one up himself. If I may, I will pose one to him. There are many municipal drains in Ontario that drain farmland. From time to time, beavers decide to impede that drainage. When that happens, that can cause severe damage and damage very quickly to farmers' fields. My question is this: who is responsible for removing those obstacles, those dams? And is there any requirement that they be done in a timely fashion so as not to cause further damage?
Thank you very much for the question. Good question. Beaver dams are not a new issue. Some parts of the province, they've been dealing with the outcome of beavers for many years. Whose responsibility is it to remove beaver dams? It's the municipalities on municipal drains. The interesting subpart of that question is, if it's a beaver dam on a natural water course, the answer is nobody. No one is responsible for managing beaver and beaver activity and flooding activity. People do take action, but it's not a responsibility, and it's certainly not a municipal responsibility, and you need to be careful about even getting involved in something like that. However, on municipal drains, it is a municipal responsibility. What's the time frame? Whatever the municipality puts on it in compliance with law. You still must do actions on water courses in compliance with things such as the Fisheries Act, the Endangered Species Act, the Conservation Authorities Act. But most of those pieces of legislation will allow for quick action. So if you're not getting a quick response, I would say talk to the drainage superintendent of the municipality, and if that's not getting any quick action, then talk to the council members.
Microphone number 2.
Yeah, thank you. Tom Patterson. I'm a councillor at Clearview Township. I'm also chair of the local hospital board. My question is regarding redevelopment planning that happens from time to time with hospitals and the dealings with the municipalities. In a conforming exercise, municipalities have to align with the PPS and the current growth plans, in our case, the Golden Horseshoe. There seems to be a gray area, although it's firm on one side and firm on the other, whether or not a hospital, in our case 450 employees, is an employment opportunity, certainly not an industrial opportunity or institutional. And those distinctions are important if we are to move forward on our planning applications. If it's not an employment opportunity, then we would have to wait for the ongoing municipal comprehensive reviews that are going on right now, which may be a 2 or 3 year period before we can even start to make planning applications. I asked this question at AMO. It appeared to be clear to the panelists at AMO that the hospital was an employment center. The opinion in the municipal world, and from MMA, for example, is that it may not be, is not. Can I get some kind of an opinion if others are having the same kind of discussions about the distinctions of those?
Sandra, do you have any comment, any thoughts?
That's an interesting question. I don't have experience with that as far as hospitals go. The studies that we've done in Huron County on employment lands are more for those more true industrial type uses and haven't included highway commercial or institutional uses. So I'm not, I don't have a definitive answer for you on that, but that has been sort of the way that we've studied it in Huron County.
Jody, do you have any experience in this?
No, and I know that dealing with issues of what are employment uses and where they fit and where they don't fit really have been the subject of many Ontario Municipal Board hearings across the province. You'd really have to canvass a variety of them to see what the interpretation has been in the context of the applicable official plan and relevant policies. It really is going to be dependent on the local planning documents in addition to the policy framework.
Microphone number 3.
Hi, my name is Rosalie Evans. I'm currently the Solicitor Clerk for the municipality of Nebing, which is between Thunder Bay and Minnesota in northwestern Ontario. We're a very small municipality, and we work closely with 5 other rural municipalities that surround Thunder Bay. We call ourselves the Lakehead Rural Municipal Coalition, and we have a question about fiduciary duties on boards, and so this is for Jody. We, as municipalities, are obligated to pay levies to certain outside agencies. District Social Services Administration boards, conservation authorities, local boards of health, and as a corollary, we have the right to appoint a representative either for your own municipality or shared with another municipality. So that's a representative, and it's an elected official who gets appointed to the board. When they get to the board table, whether it's Conservation Authority or DSUB or whoever, they're given legal opinions to say that when you're sitting at this table, you don't think about your home municipality. The best interest of this corporation is the one you have to deal with. And I say it's a little bit different when you're an elected official and you're appointed to a board. So I'd like the panel to address that. Is the fiduciary only think about this municipality applicable when you're talking about elected officials appointed to not-for-profit boards?
Whoa, nonprofit boards or local boards?
Well, the problem is that the lawyers giving the opinions are applying private corporate law because they're saying, well, they're incorporated. Their body's corporate, therefore this law applies. And I say they're not for profit, but that's not the same realm. It's your elected officials. We're now mixing politics and corporate law.
Jody, do you want to try to take a run?
Happy to. Thanks for your question, Rosalie. And surprisingly, maybe to some of you, this is not an uncommon question. This is something that we see come across on a fairly regular basis. And it is an interesting question in terms of obligations when a member of council is sitting as an appointee of council on local boards or on corporations constituted by the municipality. And yes, I think first and foremost, the obligation when you're sitting on any body is to the body that you're sitting on. And the best example I can give for this, outside of this idea of fiduciary duty that Rosalie mentions, in terms of where your financial obligations and your ethical and trust obligations lie, is thinking about things. The question that I often will receive is, when Councillor X sat on that board, they received information in a closed meeting of that body, but that we should know that as the council appointing them. He should come back or she should come back and tell us. And their confidentiality obligations are to the body that they're sitting on at the time. And sometimes it causes some consternation, but I think for the most part, even though they're elected officials, they still are sitting on a separately constituted body. From a political decision-making perspective, that is really murky and can be murky, because you're coming with perhaps input from your council, you're coming with input perhaps from your own community, and you have different views perhaps than other people sitting on the body with you, whether it's members of the public or members from other municipalities. But you bring all of that and you conduct yourself as a member of that body. And sometimes we get asked the question, can council pass a resolution and tell that member how to vote on the Conservation Authority or the other board that they're sitting on? And generally not. They can receive the input, but to instruct the member how to vote, that's going to be their own personal decision at the end of the day, taking all of the information into account.
The same principle applies between upper and lower tier. I mean, it's the same sort of principle. All right, microphone number 1.
Don McKay, Mayor of East Aurora Tavistock. Another question for Sid. Under the Drainage Act, the municipal drains have a long history, some of them going back more than 100 years. But as southwestern Ontario is being transformed into larger agriculture parcels, some of those now own most or all of that watershed in the municipal drain. Do you have cautions or concerns, or how might one of those landowners go ahead to say, forget the municipal drain, I own it all or most of it, and I just want to do my own solutions maintenance for that watershed?
Yeah, another very, very good question. We were actually talking about that just before the session, about how some farming operations are getting very large and they almost become a single type ownership. Nonetheless, municipal drains are municipal infrastructure, and they continue to be municipal infrastructure as long as you have a bylaw granting its legal existence. So what I've suggested before is in a situation like that, where the drain now is really serving one group of property owners, the property owner could request council to abandon a portion of the drain. And so you can identify, we're going to abandon it from this point to this point. And once it's abandoned by bylaw, and there's a process spelled out in the Drainage Act, once it's abandoned, it no longer is a municipal responsibility. Now, before I say the property owner can do with it as they want, I again point out that there still is other legislation that may impact what you do on a water course. So it's not a free-for-all. They can't do whatever they want. They still have to do, after it's abandoned, they still have to do it in compliance with other laws.
Thank you. Rob?
Just to add into that, the one problem that you always run into is, even though the ownership can be consolidated and you have, an owner that owns the most of it, generally there's roads involved somewhere too. And so then the municipality has to decide, I'm a party to this project too, and maybe my road needs an outlet, and maybe I still want this as the outlet for my road allowance. So that's another complication.
Thank you. Microphone number 2. Oh.
I wanted to add one more comment to Rob's. Rob makes a really good point, and I should point out as well that abandonment may be requested, but it is still up to the discretion of the municipality, the municipal council. You can say no. if you think that it serves your purposes, even though the property owner wants it. It's not a given that it's going to happen.
Microphone number 2.
Thank you. My name is Vince Carroll. I'm from Montague Township of Lanark County. Another question for Sid, please. As dairy, or not dairy farms, as farm properties are getting bought up by larger farm corporations or family farms, and tile drainage is brought in, the existing farms next to the developing properties. So rule of thumb is you can't dump water onto each other. Can you hold water back on the farm? So hypothetically, Sid, you're the developed farm that's tile drained, and the young lady to your left is the farm that is just basic and natural drains were working. Conservation Authority at our end of the country, it says it's not their problem. Conservation Authority represents Lanark County, which is Rideau Valley Conservation, claims it's not their problem.
To a degree, I think they're right. This is a question that I'm going to assume has nothing to do with the Drainage Act. It is a property owner doing some sort of drainage development, and they need outlet for tile drainage. Is that correct?
Not completely. So, as I say, you're the bought property. You have been tile drained.
Yeah.
The young lady to your left, she's the farm that has been beside you for 75 years. They had some natural ditches going through, not just go from her property to your property to wherever the water got to. Now that the tile drainage has been done, they've plugged up the existing old ditches, and when the property owner went to RVCA, they said, it's not our problem, you'll have to come up with another solution.
Okay, I am going to assume, though, that the Drainage Act doesn't have anything to do with this. This is a private ditch and private drainage activities.
Correct.
And in that situation, what the courts have indicated is that, number one, surface water has no right of drainage, and anybody who collects and concentrates water and directs it onto somebody else, number one, they can be held liable for the damages. Second, the courts have also said that if there is a long, uninterrupted use of water, such as a private ditch that's shared between two property owners, and a lower property owner then says, I'm going to fill in the ditch, I'm going to put in a 6-inch pipe that's not nearly adequate to take the water, and it starts to cause upstream problems, they can claim, you'd have to prove it to the court, but they can claim what's called a prescriptive right of drainage. It's my non-legal aspect of it, I call it a squatter's right, but for drainage. It's if you can prove that you've had drainage in this direction for a long time, and now this guy who put in the tile drainage and now blocked up the ditch has impacted you, you may have legal action. However, I'll tell you what I normally tell that property owner upstream: legal action costs money. You may be better off to spend your money petitioning to make it into a municipal drain to solve the problem practically as opposed to legally. Is that fair, Jody?
I wouldn't disagree with you, Sid.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Good morning, John Lau, Councillor, Municipality of Huron East, representing the Village of Brussels. Shout out to panel member Sandra Weber, who's also a former Brusselite. This question refers back to Jody, what she opened with, and it's actually directed to you, Fred, on your further comments on what you regarded as being quite cautious in regards to allowing councillors or whomever to partake by phone or video conference. I'm just wondering if there's a more proactive approach. This affects me greatly. I travel for work and I can be in Toronto or Ottawa, but you know, in the evening I'm well and able to partake in a council meeting, but I'm stuck somewhere else. And I'm looking through the eyes of the ratepayer who think, geez, that John Lau guy has missed another meeting, and when I could be there, and I'm wondering why you're so cautious on allowing this.
Why I'm so cautious?
Yeah, you
Well, it's really simple in my world. The premise of the Municipal Act is councils are going to be accountable and transparent. And I think this introduction of this takes some transparency away from councils. I think you need to have some rules in terms of how you determine who's eligible not to be present at a meeting, and that's why you need to time stamp it. As I said, if you have a 5-person council and 3 people want to be away, only 2 of them are eligible. And how do you pick those 2? Don't leave that up to a raffle conducted by the clerk. That doesn't work very well. So you need a time frame for it. You need to ensure that your participation in the meeting, because you're away, that you are participating, that people can see or hear your comments, that you have the ability to speak, that you have the ability, people have the ability to see how you voted, and vice versa. That's why I'm saying you need an order, a sense of order, and you need to do votes that are recorded so people know how you voted. Is it a good idea? I have to tell you, from the day I got to Sudbury Council said to me, go and try and get this legislation. And I failed miserably for 23 years in Sudbury. I couldn't convince anybody. It's now here, and for some municipalities it's going to be helpful. The other provision that some places are thinking about is limiting the number of times per year, putting that in the bylaw that you will be eligible to be away and attend virtually. All I'm saying to you is have a really good debate at council and understand the rules you put in place and make sure they are fair, not only to members of council, but also to the public. Okay, microphone number 1.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Art Versteeg, the Reeve of Howick Township in Huron County, and my question is on the building code, so for Lynn. In our community, we've had some kids, some young people looking to build tiny houses. They're getting interested in that, and I also see it from my perspective, it might be an affordable housing opportunity for us in municipalities. But anyway, what these kids are bumping up against is the requirements of the building code, minimum square footages, door widths, stair requirements. Is there any opportunity for some adjustment? You know, we're looking at a unique type of housing so that some of the prescriptive requirements of the building code can be relaxed or adjusted for their benefit.
Actually, that's an excellent question, and it's something that's going to, it started to come up, and it's going to come up more and more. And you're very right. The building code hasn't kept up with, you know, evolving and the new technology and the new you know, housing forms that are starting to become more popular. And it's a valid thing that they're running into problems with minimum size of stairways and minimum area sizes and those sort of things. And there really isn't any alternatives that you can actually propose to say, well, I'll make my room this much smaller, but in light of doing that, I'm going to make this bigger. There really isn't any, you know, objectives and alternatives that you can put forward. And I can only hope that, you know, the province will start to look at some of these new forms as affordable housing options that need to be addressed, and we need to come out with some regulations. And I received an email a couple of weeks ago that the International Building Code in the States has actually now set a section aside in their residential building code to actually specifically deal with tiny houses and some minimum standards that are below sort of the minimum housing standards, but are still going to provide a level of safety. But you're right, we aren't at a position right now where the building code's actually covering off and able to address these types of issues. And until we do, we're going to be kind of stuck with, yeah, these are great ideas, but you know, we're having a challenge accommodating them.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Thank you, Fred. Kevin Eccles, Mayor of the Municipality of West Grey. I did win the pen yesterday, so I get the chance to make this question a lot longer.
On this proviso, the clock is ticking down, and I don't have the Premier here to expand the time, so go for it.
It's directly to you. You were just using the example a few minutes ago of a council of 5. 3 members were going to be away, and you'd have to choose which, because you could only use 2. But my understanding is that the virtual members will not be part of quorum.
That's right.
So if you've only got a council of 5 and you've only got 2 in the room, you don't have quorum, so you don't have a meeting.
That's right. So that third person, the last person in the game, has got to decide if they want to make the effort to attend or not. That's exactly right.
That's what you're meaning. And if they can't attend, obviously there's no meeting.
There's no meeting.
Okay.
Exactly.
That was the clarification I was looking for.
All right.
Thank you.
Good question. Microphone number 1 again.
Thank you. Ted Smith, Deputy Mayor Township of Brock. This is regarding zoning and of medical marijuana facilities. I think a lot of them are going to be probably in land that's zoned industrial, but some of them are going to be established, I'm quite certain, on rural lands. Should they be zoned? How should they be zoned? In our municipality, we still think of them as an industrial use. Some might view it as commercial, others might view it as agricultural. To me, we should all be the same, and I just wondered how that, in your opinion, that should be handled.
Sandra.
Yes, so in our urban areas, we have permitted these in industrial lands. But in the agricultural areas, the approach that we're taking is that they are related to agriculture, the growing of a product, and we have a provision in our zoning for agricultural, commercial, industrial related uses on farm properties. So quite likely one of those AG3 zonings for a facility like that. That's what we're considering.
We have 24 seconds.
With regards to the, I'm Teresa Quinlan from the town of Pelham. Just getting back to, calling in on the meeting. What about video streaming? Video streaming, FaceTime, does that make
Absolutely.
you present? Are you present if you could video stream?
Yes.
Okay, so then that's the alternative for that individual. He can FaceTime and video stream into the meeting?
No, if he's
Oh,
he's
no?
not counted, there's no quorum. In the example that I
So
cited,
video stream, even though the person's face is there and you can see him or her?
you can use that as the technique for having someone
But it still
attend
doesn't
virtually.
count?
It counts, not in quorum, though.
Okay, all right,
Right.
that's very unique. That's interesting.
Let me take the opportunity to thank the panel. Interesting questions, both from the group and the ones that we had written in. Appreciate your attending this morning and being here. Again, thank you to the panel.
Well, Fred and panel, Fred, Lynn, Jody, Sid, Robert, and Sandra, thank you very much. Michael Smithers question box is such an important part of the Roma Conference tradition, and thank you for keeping this tradition alive. And we look forward to next year as well.